Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kauschi. So Niaga Spotlight goes through the week in business and future affairs, market watch, industries, analysis and insights. We've got you covered right here on Niaga Spotlight. Now today on analysis, we're diving deep into basically tech startups, but in the beverage industry. So a couple of factoids before we get started. Now, did you know the beverage industry is a highly competitive global and domestic market? In Malaysia, interestingly enough, as of 2023, the valuation came in at a staggering 14.21 billion ringgit. Also, a cumulative annual growth rate of close to 3%. And one beverage favorite, that cup of morning coffee has become an everyday necessity for many Malaysians. A prime industry player in Malaysia is, of course, not a stranger to many of us, ZUS Coffee, which prides itself on being Malaysia's #1 tech-driven coffee chain. Now, ZUS reached an impressive milestone just last month, opening its 500th outlet and counting. They also have close to 50 outlets in the Philippines and almost around 4,000 employees across both countries. So there is plenty to discuss, and I have the absolute pleasure of Venon Tian, who is the Chief Operating Officer of ZUS Coffee, joining us live in the AWANI studios for Niaga Spotlight to share more about the ZUS growth story. Venon, good morning. Thank you so much for making time. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic. So pleasure to have you with us in the studios, and let's get started off by, going a little bit back into the origins of things. So ZUS actually has 8 original co-founders. Tell us about how each one of you sort of bring a different dynamic into the expertise that led to building a coffee startup that is also tech-enabled.
Yeah, so that's actually very interesting, right? Because you mentioned different skill sets, different dynamics that adds to the table in terms of the startup itself. And most of the times when we see founders, they always probably come from the same background and whatnot. But all of us, surprisingly, has different skill sets. Yeah, our CEO himself is more of a product person. More of a marketing person as well. Myself, I'm more of an operations person. We have our head barista, Terence. Is of course a barista. He is the one who innovates most of the products, understands the technicalities of coffee and all. We have our currently our BD director, who's more of a real estate guy, used to be in finance and helps to oversee that part of things in terms of store growth. So everyone actually adds different value to the table. I'm very, very grateful that we have the 8 of us to help to scale. But again, how did we all have the 8 of us gathered together? I think it's just a long story.
Okay,
but anyhow,
give me perhaps the elevator pitch for that. How did it come together and actually coalesce your different expertise, at the same time a deep passion for coffee itself?
I think it all started with just the 2 main founders, or very 2 initial person. It was sitting in a mama and was just discussing what was like a good business, right? Our CEO himself, he exited his first startup. It was a e-commerce beauty store,
right?
Sold to a Japanese company, and then was just thinking, what is like the next good business to start. So that was the initial discussion, and that's where the first 2 co-founders came into the picture. Then he reached out to friends and was like, hey, how do we start this business? Because we have no knowledge in coffee. And that's where the other team members come into the picture. And then I'm actually the last person in the whole of the 8 group.
Right.
And because I add value in terms of operations. And that was the time where we wanted to scale. Yeah. So I came in the last. Yeah.
I think it's fascinating because you've got this magic number 8 that came together, and at the same time though, moving into the fact that ZUS prides itself of being a tech-driven coffee chain. What I find super fascinating about the story, Venon, is that for in your case actually, the associated pickup and delivery mobile application, or the app, was actually developed even before the launch of the first outlet physical store. How did that work, and was it unusual?
I think it's just because we were very comfortable to build app. I mean, I've been in tech startup for the longest time. I think I've been in textile for more than 10 years. Our CEO himself, again, used to run e-commerce, right? So it's very familiar in terms of who can we leverage on, how do we build app, how should the very first, first version of the app should look like. So it was very much a natural thing, and we built that app within a month and a half before the store was actually in place, because we have no idea how should it be.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's why we had that app first before the store. And once we launched that, the very first thing was to acquire customer and to make sure that we do have sufficient database when we launch the very, very first store.
Exactly. Yeah. So that brings me to the point that, well, of course, the beverage industry in Malaysia, it's definitely lucrative, but at the same time, it's highly competitive.
Correct.
So what gap did the ZUS co-founders and yourself believe that you were filling in the market? And how were you able to sort of find your feet once the mobile app was on its way and up and running?
Yeah, so you look in the market itself, right? You have a lot of what I would say the most accessible coffee would be from your convenience stores.
Sure.
Yeah. And they price themselves 5 ringgit and below. You also have what we call third space model coffee chains, which sells coffee at a slightly premium price, because most of the time you are paying for the space rather than coffee. And it sells, say, an Americano for more than 10 ringgit. And what we see in the market is very much like a gap between 6 to 10 ringgit. So you look at our prices in our menu, it's actually 6 ringgit 90 cents for Americano, and latte is actually around 9 ringgit 90 cents.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So that is the gap in terms of price point. And for the longest time, you actually see a lot of independent cafes selling coffees at that price point.
Roughly or so,
yeah.
Yes.
But you don't get like a chain store, right, that you can easily recognize. So that's the gap that we saw. The second thing is that the biggest problem that most of the time when you go to a coffee shop or coffee chain is that you constantly have the queue for your coffee.
Sure.
So the most convenient way is that if you be able to order your coffee and then go to the store and pick it up, that saves a lot of time. And also to reduce that kind of awkwardness when you have in stores. Like for instance, if let's say we have to go for coffee today, we'll probably have to go to the counter and order, and someone has to sit at the table and wait for your drinks.
That's right. And everybody is used to, well, your morning wait, going on interminably because somebody's going to have an extra complicated order, right? Right in front of you when you're late.
And then you probably get frustrated and whatnot because you are in the queue, right? But with the whole app concept itself, it actually saves time. It becomes very fast and eliminates all of these, distractions. And we call ourselves a fast coffee chain. Yeah, rather than your typical, just more third space model or even your convenience store kind of coffee. So these are the gaps that we see, and the app helps us to make things much smoother, and it eventually becomes a habit, right? Like say every morning, I'll go to, before I leave my house, there is a ZUS Coffee 5 minutes away from my house, and I would just click on Americano, order, and I'll pick it up from the store. And it makes it very, very convenient for me. But if, say, I were to drive to the store, I think the Malaysian culture is you double park and then you go down, order your coffee, and I have to wait, then I'll probably have to think twice.
A very stressful, maybe 5-10 minutes in that entire interaction.
Becomes less accessible, right? Which is one of the key pillars that we look into when growing the brand, because accessibility is very, very important. And that is not just so much of just product accessibility. Yeah. So if you look at product itself, you have the how does the product taste like? Second one is price accessibility. You need to make sure that the product is priced at the right price point. Yeah. Then the third one is that location accessibility, how you can order our products from different platforms. So that's one of the key things that we look into when growing the brand.
Fantastic. So speaking about the accessibility when it comes to location, that of course takes me into really wanting to go and spend a few minutes on you sharing with us about how did ZUS manage to keep up the trajectory, because quite soon after you launched, 2019 was the entry point, but once 2022 was in, all the way up to late 2021, meaning basically beginning of 2022, we had pandemic lockdowns. Yeah. So what happened during that very crucial time, which allowed ZUS to sort of continue keeping up a growth trajectory despite the fact that many businesses were going through the exact opposite, Venon?
Yeah. So you look at, we first launched our very first store in late 2019. That was, I think, sometime in November, December. And it was right below an office building called Binjai 8. Very, very proud that we started off from that store. It was very humble, 200 over square feet kind of kiosk.
Right.
And the focus during that time is very much delivery. Yeah. So the very first thing that we did was to tie up with local delivery platforms to help us deliver coffee. And the whole idea is for people to order their coffee through the app and deliver around the KLCC vicinity.
Yes, and that's no mistake either, location-wise.
Yeah, because
that
it's
is
more
the
dense.
hub.
People are a bit more savvy in terms of using the app, and people are also a bit more acceptable when it comes to this kind of like tech, new tech stuff in town,
They're
ordering
excited
coffee
to try
online.
It out.
Yeah, but imagine if our first store was somewhere else and everyone's going to be questioning, hey, why should I order my coffee online?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was one of the biggest questions we constantly get. Then the second store was actually in Atria in Damansara.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and during that time we were like, hey, maybe we should really tag along with the mall traffic and see how it goes. Yeah, and just wanted to test out how things were, right? But unfortunately and fortunately for the business, there was COVID that happened in March.
Fair.
Yeah. Of course, it hit a lot of businesses, and a lot of businesses were scrambling to go online during that time. But what I would say is that it was the right timing for Zeus because we were already digital ready from day one.
Correct. You were already comfortably online and just exploring and growing it in the appropriate ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we were already in that mode in the sense that we were online, acquiring customers online, delivering food online, delivering coffee online, and everything was just there. All we had to do was, again, make sure that we had more stores to distribute to more customers. Then the third store came about, which is right after the first MCO, which is May 2020. And we still wanted to try out the mall, format. And we had our
physical
third store. Yeah, physical store. And the third store was actually in IOI Puchong. Yeah. And we were testing out to see how the customer patterns are, who uses more app, which location works better. Again, very fortunate that people were, quite happy with our brand and our products. We had our fourth store, which is in shop lots. In Malaysia itself, you have a lot of typical street shop kind of stores, right? It ranges about 1,000 to 1,500 square feet. It's in Taman Desa, neighborhood kind of demographic feel. People can double park, that sort of location. And but not for that specifically, because we were in one of the lorong behind, right? And that was only so much we could afford during that time.
Fair enough.
And we tested and found that we found the right model. We want to be in neighborhoods. And we also told ourselves that we don't know how long is COVID gonna last for, right? And just say that, hey, that's the right model. Why not let's scale?
Right, exactly. So where did you go and when was it, if you recall, the point from we're not sure how long it's going to last to we're on a trajectory, we can afford to almost open a dozen or less stores a month?
Yeah. So during that time was actually July 2020. Yeah. We decided to scale that model. And our first store after that was actually, the fifth store after that was actually Bukit Jalil.
Right.
Yeah, and from then on, we started to have more stores of that kind. I think during that time, 1 week we had one store, and we ended 2020 with, I think, 18 stores. Yeah, but in between, we were also trying out with some of the bubble tea brands, where we have a coffee machine inside a bubble tea store. But that didn't work out so well. And we realized that a lot of people would still want to recognize a brand.
True.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, during that time, right, you have the movement control, and one person can only leave home, and you maybe try to find excuses to want to go somewhere, right?
Fair enough.
And people would recognize that brand, and Zeus became that brand where they can easily recognize. Maybe they just feel better ordering online, go to the store, pick up. But it didn't work out that way for those kind of stores in store.
Right.
Yeah. So then we scrapped that, and we continued to grow that part of things. So we ended 2020 with close to about 18 stores. Then we started to scale from there even more. In 2021, we had 60. 2022, we had 180. 2023, we ended the year with 360. And as of today, I think we've got about 530 stores and on track to hit about 700
That's
stores.
incredible, because I think when I was planning on, speaking and featuring ZUS Coffee, it was at 500, and that was not even a month ago.
Okay.
So you basically opened
Yeah.
almost 30 outlets. But that being said, though, your app also is the nexus of gaining all those consumer insights.
Yeah.
Tell me about how, of course, with Gen AI being the hot topic of the past year, how that is also helping to gather even more consumer insights and also help expand the offerings that ZUS has, taking you from just being a coffee chain into more of a brand, a consumer brand.
Yeah, I think let's split it out into two parts of things, right?
Sure.
One would be data and the other one would be AI, right? We became a very natural thing where, of course, initially we were just using the app as a tool for customers to place order. Yeah. And
just a landing point in a sense.
yeah, it becomes convenient. People could just pick up their orders, and then but of course we were using that as an acquiring tool as well, where we gave out free coffee, join the app, just so that you get familiarized and it becomes a habit, right? Sometimes ordering food on an app, and from there we've actually gathered a lot of different kind of patterns on how customer consume. For instance, Tamina would buy your coffee in the morning and from certain kind of locations.
Right.
And I would buy coffee in the afternoon and from certain kind of locations, maybe after lunch or during your tea time or during dinner. And all these insights and data helps us to make different kind of decisions. And also tells us which kind of location should we open at what time, when do we push what kind of promotions. Yeah, maybe this store is not doing so well at 3 to 5 p.m. Yeah.
So lots of just-in-time insights, right?
Yeah. So all these kind of insights helps us to what we call performance marketing. Yeah. So we were doing a lot of performance marketing in the early days, even now, to really boost up that revenue, right? Because if, say, I've already paid the rent, I can operate for 14 hours a day. Say I open from 8 to 10, but my revenue is not so good during this time. So why not let's become more aggressive, and 3 to 5, maybe let's give some discounts for certain kind of drinks that would matter more to people. Say at 3 to 5, most people do not go into a coffee shop because they're afraid that caffeine, they can't sleep during the night, right?
Very true.
So maybe let's push out a notification and say that, hey, there's a 20% discount on our fraps. It tastes a bit sweet. Maybe that's at that point of time you need something sweet, right? So
maybe a tea option. Yeah,
exactly. But again, it's very different kind of location based.
Sure.
So we split them into different cohorts, different kind of tiers, different kind of members on how they spend, and we tailor promotions and campaigns for these kind of customers.
Fascinating.
And that's how we utilize data. Of course, now we've got even more data in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of what, all sorts. And when it comes to developing products, it also helped us in terms of which are the best ingredients that work for what kind of customers. Yeah, and that's how we came up with our hero product, which what we call Spanish latte.
That's right.
I think that's also what most our customers like. And it was actually based on customers liking milk, liking that flavor. And we realized that, hey, actually a lot of customers actually like that kind of thing. And we developed a flavor out from
the
that.
flavor profile coming from there. Okay.
Let's just say most customers actually consume a lot of caramel. Then our team would then work on caramel and say that, hey, we want to target this particular customer range, and that would be the flavor that they will go for. Yeah, and that's in terms of data, product, and how do we utilize all of those, right? In terms of AI-wise, we have actually developed the extended version of that is that all of these have automated, and the system would actually read how the customer consume, how the customer spend, and push out certain, product promos and run certain kind of campaigns automatically on its own. And it's what we call internally a CDP or a customer data platform to help us to automate all of these. So I think that would have helped in terms of how we scale. I think the AI part helped us to scale better, but that was the initial phase of things how we've been doing. And now we are exploring a lot of how AI, in fact, if you ask me, I think AI is like more like a buzzword, but it's just automating how we run operations or how we operate the entire business on itself.
Exactly. And you have actually been doing that since day one and even before. Short comment perhaps, Venon, on the fact that Zeus does not really follow or focus on the franchising model in order to expand. Can you tell me why? And what have been some recent developments in 2024 whereby where does that you're experimenting with giving out franchises but internally to employees who are interested and ambitious enough?
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was, people already know about that. But anyway, the early days is that we do have one external franchisee,
right?
And that was from very, very early days where we have not anchored the fact that we want to run this all on our own. And this was in early 2020. We also have some stores which are all owned by shareholders and directors that are all franchisees to the brand, because initially we wanted to, prove that this really works before we scale.
Sure.
So from that point where I was talking about the Taman Desa and Bukit Jalil and all these kind of stores, these were all franchise stores, but owned by internal, again, shareholders and directors. Then only we told ourselves in 2021, no more franchisee stores. We're going to run ourselves, because ultimately we want to eliminate the conflict of interest. And then the second part is that we want to maintain consistency. I think the biggest challenge for our business is always managing people.
Absolutely.
I think people, it's just so dynamic and fluid, and it's not so much like business is very objective, right? I want to do this, and
you have
there's
to
a solution.
sort of identify what's your culture as a company, right?
Yeah, people, there's emotions and all, right? But imagine managing people is so challenging. Imagine managing so many bosses, because these are the people who invest in the business and run in every individual store. It's even more challenging, right? So we decided, let's not do franchise. We want to maintain the quality, the consistency, and that brand presence, right? Ultimately, it's the brand equity that matter. So we decided no more franchise, and we have been doing it all on our own. Again, we're very fortunate because we have banks who've been very supportive over our growth and have been providing us, a lending hand when we need it. Yeah. So up to today, we've not raised a lot of money. Sometime last year we did do one round. And again, that helped us to scale until today. And as of today, we don't have any new franchisees except for overseas expansion, which
That's right.
Happy to share more later. But in terms of the internal franchisee program, it's something that we wanting to launch, but very, very challenging, because then you have to weigh between, hey, I'm going to lose one very, very good talent owning a store. But the whole objective is we want to give back to our own employees. We want them, a lot of them that we spoke to, want to run a business eventually.
Right.
Yeah, of course they got inspired by how we run business, how we've scaled, how we have been doing things, right? And
learning those tools while you're on the job, and then perhaps applying them on a slightly larger scale is exactly what you want.
And
right.
For the business itself, you don't want to lose these kind of talents because they are hungry. They
100%.
want to, they want to own a business. And for us, I think as a brand that's scaling and growing, it's only right for us to give back to them and say, hey, maybe one day you should own Zeus. And that's something that we're working on, just to make sure that our people don't leave our community, our internal community, and to make sure the brand still upholds its quality, because these guys would then, they're already trained, they know how to run the business, and eventually be there to be Zeus ambassadors, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So from there, because you did also briefly mention, I would love to focus a little on your overseas expansion. So Filipino billionaire Frank Lau reportedly purchased a 35% stake in Zeus, and this was March 2023.
Yep.
So a little more than a year on, you're close to 50 outlets in the Philippines. How has it been like taking a very Malaysian coffee brand, much beloved, into a completely different market, even though it is still ASEAN? And what are some of the learning experiences?
Funny thing is, a lot of times you don't really see a lot of Malaysian brands going to the Philippines, right? We always talk about Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and the rest of that, or Singapore, not so much of Philippines. But Frank came to Malaysia, they saw our brand, they saw our stores, and he was very happy with what we were doing. He likes that whole young energy. In fact, a lot of our team members in HQ are 30 and below. It was like, hey, this is like something that he wants to own. He reached out and said that he wants to put in some money and help us to grow the business. And that's how the whole investment came picture. And then during that point of time, we were like, hey, did we neglected Philippines, which is on the other side?
Yes.
And which is very much influenced by more Western brands most of the time. Yeah, you have all the US brands and all.
Yes,
then,
coffee, of course, being part of the mainline culture too.
Yeah. And we were a little bit worried when we first entered Philippines or was considering Philippines because it's just so, the whole culture is just different, right? Then we thought, oh, let's give it a shot and try it out because there's no clear, biggest winner in Philippines yet, and also want to showcase what a Malaysian brand can do in the international stage. Yeah. So I still remember the first trip that we did to Philippines was actually May 2023, which is 1.5 months after the whole investment deal.
Sure.
And we seconded our team member over there in August 2023, and we started our very first store in October 2023. We were recognized as a Malaysian coffee chain, up and rising Malaysian coffee chain, but now it's very much seen as like an international brand. Yeah, and people like us. The menu over there reflects a little of our signature products, our classic products as well. But we also
for that
have
brand identity.
Exactly, and we also have some local products as well, which is flavors like ube.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
The purple sweet potato.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it's not something that most Malaysians would recognize in Malaysia.
Well, we
but
don't call it ube anyhow.
Yeah. But in Philippines, it's like a widely known kind of local flavor. Everyone loves it. Then we use our flavors and infuse ube into it, and it became a hype, and it's still growing. In fact, Philippines, it's very, very exciting. Yeah, and as of today, yes, we are close to 50 stores. Hopefully, by end of the year, everything is smooth. We should be able to hit more than 100 stores.
Amazing. So outside of the overseas expansion, just coming back into the Malaysian landscape before we close out, Venon, I have to ask you, so does Zeus have aspirations towards perhaps even unicorn status as an F&B enterprise?
I think unicorn is, again, a buzzword, right? To us, it's very much, I think, less of valuation. We are here to really prove, I think from the early days, we are here to showcase to everyone that Malaysian brands can overtake bigger international chains as well. Yeah, and we've proved that in Malaysia. Yeah, and now what we want to prove is that Malaysian brands can expand overseas and, really showcase to the world that we are someone. Yeah, because sometimes I joke with some friends and always tell them that, hey, I used to study in the UK, and people always ask me where Malaysia is when I say I'm a Malaysian, right? And I'll always have to explain it's between Bangkok and Singapore.
Right.
But imagine if, let's say, there is a recognizable brand, which coffee, it's something that everyone consumes.
Translates
worldwide.
Across the generations, yeah.
And if we are able to bring a Malaysian brand out of Malaysia and showcase to the world that, hey, this came from Malaysia, it's so good, and it's still growing. And I think that's something that we are very, very proud of, which is why last year we championed a event called Buatan Malaysia. Yeah, which we got all the Malaysian brands together and showcase to the world, hey, did you know that this is from Malaysia? Yeah, which most people do not know. And this year we're going to do again. And again, just want to remind Malaysians that we can do a good job and be in the international scene. And that's my vision. And we'll continue to be on that mode over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time today, Venon. And we wish you all the success in expanding into every neighborhood there is. Not just Malaysia, but ASEAN-wide perhaps.
Thanks.
Fantastic. All right, so that's all we have time for today on Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kausji. We will be here back again next week with more business highlights right here on Astro AWANI. We'll see you again then. Have a productive week ahead.